Hey there, welcome. This is the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Happy Tuesday, welcome to the big show. Hey, did you hear about the shooting spree in Florida? Some woman got spooked by the eclipse, and I don't know if she had voices talking to her. She sounded like a crazy person. But she was going down the road, just squeezing off rounds in the panhandle, just hit a dude in the arm, went up to another car, shot a dude in the neck. No coverage? You didn't see that? Yeah, it just doesn't fit the narrative. So she doesn't look like Sean over there. So that's the problem. So you have the news that's been lying to you constantly to your face all day, every day, omitting stories like that, telling you things that you can see with your own eyes cannot be true. One of which has been some of the curious claims from the trans movement, men getting pregnant and things like that. Well, science is starting to trickle in and address this, and Jay Richards is my first guest to talk about this study that came out of the Netherlands that showed, and this seems really high, this is higher than I would have thought, most minors, 74% who identify as transgender, naturally reconcile with their bodies by adulthood. Dr. Jay, what do you take away from this?
I mean, what's funny is that it's important because it comes out of the Netherlands, because this procedure that we're calling gender-affirming care that starts with transitioning kids, changing their names, and then on to puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and finally surgery, that started in the Netherlands. In fact, it's called the Dutch protocol because of this actually very small study that they claimed helped kids. We knew from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual way back in 2013 that the vast majority of kids with gender dysphoria as minors, if allowed to go through natural puberty, actually desist. They sort of reconcile with their bodies. This new study, it's a large group study, and again, it's out of the Netherlands, confirms that. And so as you said, it's basically 74% is what they found. So most minors that are doing this. And this note is happening at the same time in which there's now massive social contagion pushing this stuff. So as you said, you wouldn't know this to listen to the media who say that, almost no one ever desists or detransitions. Yes, but what they're not telling you is what happens if you don't put kids on that transition pathway. The answer is that the majority of them will actually reconcile with their natural bodies after they go through puberty. So
what's the pushback against this study going to be?
Well, it's going to be somehow that it's non-representative, or if the past is any indication, probably mostly ignoring it by the mainstream media, though this stuff does start trickling out. Weirdly, the New York Times periodically does a fairly balanced story, and then they sort of atone for it with 10 stories on the other side. But this is actually just confirmation of what we knew for a long time and what we're finding in other places. And stuff like, for instance, tomorrow, the major CAS review report, which is a systematic review of the transition medicine in the UK, is going to be released. And we know what it's going to say because there already been preliminary stories, which is that kids overwhelmingly should be doing psychotherapy and not having this kind of medicalization of a psychological disorder made permanent in their bodies, which is what we've been doing for the last 15 years.
Well, in the reports on this, they also reference a Finland study that showed if you actually do have the hormone injections, the puberty blockers and whatnot, that doesn't actually reduce the likelihood of suicide. In fact, it goes up a little bit. So what's the pushback against that?
Yeah, it's, again, going to be either there's complicated issues down in the weeds with the statistics, but you said the top line is that not only does this not seem to help, which is what we're all told, parents who have kids that want to transition are almost always told by physicians or therapists, look, do you want a live son or a dead daughter? In other words, they're likely to commit suicide otherwise. The good news is that the incident of suicide among this cohort is already really low. And in the Finnish study, they focused specifically on puberty blockers and found that, no, it doesn't seem to help. And in fact, it might even hurt a little bit. But again, this is another study that indicates what has basically been the trend. Every entity that has done a true systematic review of the evidence, from Finland to Sweden, Denmark, the UK, the state of Florida, have found that this stuff just doesn't do what we're being told it's supposed to do. And on the other hand, it makes these radical and permanent changes to children's biology and to their sterility.
Jay Richards, is there any chance that this could be the beginning of the end, that this whole process 10 years from now won't even be a thing and it'll be looked upon as some sort of medical mutation that we just rather not talk about, like lobotomies? I think that's a pretty good comparison there.
Yeah, it's a perfect comparison. You can think of lobotomies. You can think of the eugenics controversy a century ago in which all the official organizations, including the Supreme Court, said it was great, and then all of a sudden it became embarrassing. I think that's what we're going to get. Gender ideology itself is going to be a generational fight, but this gender medicine on kids, I think that its days are numbered, and frankly, I think these gender clinics are going to get sued into oblivion by class action lawsuits with lawyers representing the detransitioners that have been harmed.
Is there any true transitioned people? Is there anything that's not something you can poke a hole in and they just genuinely deserve this surgery?
I mean, at the moment, there's no evidence that this actually helps people's psychological distress or makes them feel better. The kind of key philosophical claim is this idea that you could be born in the wrong body. So what would it mean to be a male born in a female body? I don't even think that's, not only is it not right, it's not even intelligible. It's not even clear that it means anything. And so I think that's where you got to finally focus. That's one thing if an adult man wants to sort of pretend to be a woman, but to say that he really is a woman trapped in a man's body, it's clearly philosophical nonsense.
Do we have similar numbers on adults? Does the hormones or the surgery, does it help or increase the likelihood of suicide?
It's funny you say that because actually the greatest study, a longitudinal study published some years ago now in Sweden, the Karolinska Institute did a 10-year longitudinal study on adults that had transitioned, so not kids. And what they actually found was a 19 times higher suicide rate among the people who had transitioned compared to the control group. So, in fact, the only evidence we have longitudinally actually already tells us, at least with adults, that it doesn't help suicidality. And we haven't had longitudinal studies on kids to be able to say that, but there's still no evidence that it actually helps.
Jay Richards, I'm a dad. I have 4 kids. If one of them comes to me and says, hey, I think I might be trans, what do you recommend?
I recommend, first of all, make sure you get them off of social media, talk to doctors, go online. There's therapists that actually are really clear thinking on this. And frankly, don't trust anyone without asking them, because literally this ideology has spread like a toxin, social media, in schools, among therapists, and you just got to make sure, okay, where are they getting this information, and then get them where they need to be socially and physically in a safe space so that they can struggle and work through the problems that are probably causing those feelings.
All right, Jay Richards, Heritage Foundation, thank you very much for your time.
Great to be with you.
So with this information, I think this should be an open and shut case. Trans surgeries, puberty blockers for children should not be a thing. Number one, am I wrong? Or number two, are you going in the other direction and saying, hey, we should not really be doing this for adults either? Listen, I'm a libertarian, so I think if you're an adult, you should be able to chop up your body any way you see fit. But there are some weird issues that pop up when you see it. They're more likely to commit suicide. And that I'm also kind of I'm persuaded by the argument that, hey, man, if you went into a doctor and said, can you cut off my left foot? And there's nothing wrong with it, doesn't have gangrene, it's working properly, it's perfectly healthy tissue. He wouldn't do it for ethical reasons. So why would he do it for the discussion I want to have with you. 800-288-WBAP. 800-288-9227. I'll talk to you more about this study coming up on The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey there, welcome. This is The James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Man, you'd think this would be a bigger story. The home of the trans movement and the trans surgeries, the Netherlands, has a new study that comes out. 74% of minors who identify as transgender or suffer from gender dysphoria will naturally reconcile with their bodies by adulthood. Now, this is a touchy subject because we're talking about kids here. It's easy to be flippant about adults, especially, grown men who want to just use this as an excuse to invade women's spaces. Those people, they've got other problems. But this is different because you have to think about this, or you're probably already thinking about this from the point of view of the parent, I think is where most of us would kind of associate with this a little bit. You don't have any problems wondering what gender you are, but a lot of us have kids or grandkids. And so I read a story like this and I think, I'm trying to be a good dad. I got 4 kids. What if one of them comes up to me and says, "Hey, I think I might be one of these," whatever letter they pick. So when you start to go off into the transgender, gender dysphoria section, the more information you have, the better. Your goal as a parent isn't to get clout on Instagram. It isn't to get praise at the next cocktail party or from your fellow friends or whatever. Your goal as a parent really should be what's best for the kiddo. What will make the kiddo happiest in the long run? And in the long run is the important part. That's why I see a whole lot of parents failing. Because when the kid comes up and says, "Do I want a piece of candy?" Well, if you want the kid to be happy now, you say yes. If you want the kid to be happy in the long run, you say no. If the kid says, "Can I stay up late?" If you want the kid to be happy now, you say yes. If you want the kid to be happy in the long run, you say no. It's the whole part of being a parent. So when the kid comes up to you and they ask you very complex questions that far more complex than a bag of Skittles, start arming yourself with this information. You can acquiesce, you can give in, you can give them the blockers now, and that will make them happy now. But this evidence shows, this study is at least evidence toward the idea that maybe that's not what will make them happiest in the long term. So I think we all kind of agree that even if they're going to experiment and cross-dress it and whatnot, the moral cutoff line has to be anything that sterilizes them, anything that makes a permanent change to their body before they're 18 years old, before they can make that decision on themselves. If you do anything to them, you're morally in the wrong before that point. I think that's what this study shows. Now, if this study showed the opposite, if it said the more you repress this, the more likely they are to kill themselves, or the more like you are to repress this, it only gets worse. But it sounds like if you just put this off and put it on the back burner and don't make any sudden movements, don't make any giant changes, the fact that you have a 74% chance of this reconciling itself by adulthood means you're crazy to damage your kids' internal organs over this. You're crazy to do some of these blockers. You're crazy to do surgery. Now, I don't believe this, but I know people who believe that you shouldn't even be able to do this as an adult. And I can argue against most of it, but the most compelling argument that they have against me, and this is just me playing devil's advocate, is if you went to a doctor and you said, I want to cut off my left hand. Why do you want to cut off your left hand? It works. Is it working okay? Yeah. Like all the joints working. Is it in pain? It's not in pain. Is it infected? Does it have gangrene? Is it a threat to the rest of your health? No. I just feel like I don't want a left hand. Well, a doctor wouldn't do it. Ethically speaking, you'd have a hard time finding a doctor to do that. Okay, so how are some of these other surgeries different? They're not. So I try and find some of the real world comparisons, some analogs that don't have this weird sexual component, because that just makes it weird for everybody, including me, including you. So I have heard of people removing perfectly working organs. And I don't mean like cutting off part of their earlobe or cutting off their fingernails or some, non-functional part of the body. I mean an actual organ that's working just fine, doesn't have cancer, nothing. I know of more than one woman who's had a voluntary hysterectomy. They knew they didn't want to have kids. They just didn't have that gene. They don't have the nurturing gene. They wanted to be able to focus on their career. They wanted to be able to go out there and not have the monthly visitor and all the expense and pain that comes with that, the possibility of cancer, any other negative health consequences that can be had from being a woman. They wanted to minimize that. And so I've known two. I've known 2 women who've had a voluntary hysterectomy. And the doctors didn't go do it lightly. One girl had to wait 10 years. She went into the doctor when she was 26. She wanted to go in when she was 22, but her parents said, "Listen, dude, you're not going to cut out a perfectly working body part. You may change your mind in the next 5 years." 5 years later, she didn't change it. She had to wait until she was 36 for it to happen. Do they make them wait that long to cut off perfectly fine working organs of children? I hope so, because then they wouldn't be children anymore by the time the surgery actually happened. So those are the few things that are on my mind. We do allow voluntary hysterectomy, so there is some sort of medical precedent that even overlaps with your sexual reproductive organs in removing body parts, and that's legal. So that's my best pushback. Is no, a doctor wouldn't tell you if you came in, you want to cut off your left hand, that he's going to cut off your left hand. But there is situations where it has been found to be medically ethical, and few people will argue with a voluntary hysterectomy, especially for a woman that's 36 by now. that they have been able to cut it out. And so it can't just be enough that it's a properly working body part. So there's a lot of complexities here, but I think some people can make the case. Again, I don't agree with it. I'm a little more libertarian than most of the people listening to the show, probably you too. But should this even be allowed for adults? I had one close friend that was trans, and the farthest he would do is the implants. He had already gone to the doctor and gone to all kinds of therapy and stuff, and they didn't even want to start him on hormones because they didn't think he was a strong enough case. So he was supposed to live for a woman as a year, and if he did that, then they were going to give him the implants and the hormones and whatnot. But that's different. Implants are something you can undo. Implants are not permanent. Implants can be taken out if he changes his mind at any time. It doesn't affect whether or not any of his other organs are working properly. So this is a weird topic. It's not comfortable to talk about sometimes, but this is an important topic. These are questions we need to answer because right now we have thousands of kids that are going through this right now. And this is a trend, dare I say, that is becoming more and more popular as the day goes along. And I don't think this is something that's going to be going away anytime soon. So we need to get to these answers, and we need to get to them quick. Because if we're wrong on this one, then it needs to stop. If this is going to be looked back in 10 to 15 years, like we look back on lobotomies now, then the sooner we can get past this, the better. Lobotomies were not that long ago. Lobotomies, it sounds like some weird thing in history where I can't believe we were that barbaric, where we were just sticking scissors up in people's brains and cutting out the front part because they were a little crazy and they had some, mental issues. Okay, that doesn't sound a whole lot different than what we're doing now. And remember how corrupt the medical community can be. I know you're thinking COVID. I'm thinking worse than that. I'm thinking the Tuskegee experiments. You know when that ended? In the 70s. Sean was still alive when they were doing the Tuskegee experiments. So if you're skeptical of the medical community, you're right to do so. And this study kind of confirms some of your suspicions that you had already. But I'd like to hear from you next. 800-288-9227. Should this be available for kids? Should this be available for adults? 800-288-9227. It's The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey there, welcome back. It's The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Top story of the day is based out of the Netherlands, believe it or not. I know it's a Dallas radio station, but a new study shows that 74% of minors who struggle with gender dysphoria naturally reconcile with their bodies by adulthood, and that is a very strong information point to have when we're talking about these policies that are being pushed on kids right now. What do you think? 800-288-WBAP. Eric in Crowley, you're on The James Show. What do you think about this?
Yes, sir. So thanks for letting me call in and all that good stuff. But I guess as I told the guy that took the call anyway, that when I think about this and hear about it, it reminds me of what we heard about the Nazis doing experiments on, Jewish people and gypsies and prisoners. And now we're to the point where they're people that they're supposed to love them and trust them. Their end goal is to possibly remove the child's genitals. And it's happening. They're pushing this all over the nation. It's so evil. And people
aren't you hesitant to say Nazi though? Like, don't you feel like that's going a little too far?
I mean, someone wanting to push a child and they drop the evil seed in their mind. A little child, you can get them to believe anything, and you drop a seed in their mind, like maybe you're not what you're supposed to be. Maybe you're supposed to be a girl or boy.
Right. Well, the comparison.
I think in my mind, it's absolutely the same. It's just evil. Why would someone? Because even animals have the instinct to protect their young, and these people want to basically push them in a way to destroy themselves. And
listen, so I think you're only half right, and let me tell you why. Because the Weimar Republic, which is what Germany was before the Nazis took over, they were very open-minded about what we now call LGBTQ issues. And so the Nazis were sort of a reaction to that. So to say that the LGBTQ and the Nazis overlap is bizarre.
No. I'm just saying they're just as evil. You can take any kind of context. So I'm not saying that.
Right.
They're same, but they're evil.
Let me finish.
Evil movements.
Yeah. So the part to where you're right though is they did embrace the eugenics movement, which did have as one of its features sterilizing children and sterilizing undesirables and mutilating otherwise perfectly good sexual organs. So you're half right, but they're not a pro LGBTQ crowd, and if If you're a trans person, when the Nazis take over, you're going to end up in a mass grave, probably digging your own hole, just like the rest of us.
I'm not trying to say they're the same. What I'm trying to say that what's so unique about leftism, they'll take something and they'll twist it and they'll attack a different set of people. So for now, you got the socialists they're attacking white people instead of other Jewish people and Slavs or whatever. It's a unique, like a virus. It's so evil it can be twisted around. It's like a tool. A tool can be used any direction you want.
I see what you're saying. I think we're on the same page again, Eric. Thank you for explaining yourself well. Sure. Let's go to Sean in Royce City. You're on the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now 93.3 FM.
Hey, James, just real quick as a side thought here, are we going to start seeing lawsuits now to the doctors and the parents? But like I was telling your call screener, I mean, we knew this, and this is straight up evil. I mean, however you want to look at it, this is evil. All right? We knew this. We told them, where are the lawsuits?
I think the lawsuits will happen. I think the lawsuits will happen 10, 20 years from now. They're not going to happen anytime soon. But this whole canard has to fall in on itself, and we have a long ways to go. They still haven't finished expanding. They're still pushing into sports. We haven't stopped the expansion, much less started to get rid of it. Oh no, we still have a whole we're on the way up the roller coaster. We got a long way to go with this. This is not over by a long shot, and this is going to take a while.
All right. Well, I don't know, man. This is insane. I can't see how anybody is getting away with this. I mean, we're being told, do no harm, and yet here we are. I mean, we knew this a long time ago, like you said.
Here's a couple things that make me feel better. It's not happening to my kids. If you want to go do experimental things to your kids, you're free to go do so. Live and let live, whatever. Also, in the meantime, something that I am going to enjoy, and I think you should too. This will give you a little bit of optimism. The Women's Olympics is going to be awesome until this gets reconciled. It's going to be an absolute freak show in a good way. It'll be fun. I'll watch it more under the current circumstances than the previous ones. Thank you for your call, Sean in Royce City. All right, coming up next on the James Show, we're going to talk to a workplace expert, Joel Patterson, about some new trends in the workplace. It's more than just quiet quitting now. Details next on the James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.